Hello. Hey. Thanks, you guys. Thanks for joining us here. Thanks for joining us out there in the rest of the world. And thank you, Adam, for coming by.
Thank you. Thank you.
So yeah, as Matt just said, we're going to talk up here for a little bit, and then we'll go to questions from you guys after a while. And so think about what you want to know while we're here. Congratulations, the new album just out in the world.
It's fresh out. Thank you.
Made it to the
Feels
starting
good.
line. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it seems like with this project that the album title is kind of key to what the whole project is about here. So tell us about this idea of mobile orchestra, and not just why you use that as the title, but how that sort of set what you were doing here.
The title is kind of a pun on just the fact that wherever I go, I can't turn off my mind, and I'm always working, and I'm always on the plane with my headphones on for 12 hours from LA to Tokyo, working on songs and working on music. Hotel rooms, if we have days off, all my other guys and girls in the band and the crew are off exploring, and I'm in the dark in my hotel room working on music. And yeah, it's just kind of what I've always done. So creativity doesn't care about weird places when it strikes. I was actually in the hospital last week, believe it or not, with a kidney stone, and I had my laptop and I was working on music there. So
that's a way to celebrate a release right there.
Yeah, bring it in with a bang. But yeah, so just the title is just kind of literal in that sense. But also the fact that I'm really into the tech side of it, and I love how one guy in front of a laptop can make a sound that sounds like an 80-person symphony. It's amazing what you can do now that you couldn't do even 5 years ago. It's inspiring. So it made sense.
So was there something different in the approach on these songs to what the previous albums had been? Was this is kind of the way you work, and again, the tech gets more sophisticated, you can do more things, or was there a different way into this set of songs?
It was the same approach, I think, at the outset of every record I've ever done, in just the sense of sitting down and writing songs by myself in my basement studio in my underwear at 2 a.m. and stuff like that. That'll never change. At least I hope not, because it just feels right, and it just feels natural. But the difference in this album, at least my hope, is that it sounds more diverse than some of my earlier records. And certainly the number of collaborations on this album and guests plays a big part of that. People like Aloe Blacc and Cohen and Sarah Russell, and things like that hopefully make each song stand on its own. Some of my earliest records I sort of designed to flow from one song to the next as this kind of fluid storyline. And this album is sort of more like snapshots in a photo album. So hopefully every song sounds a little bit different, but still fits under the umbrella.
And was that a target going in, or was that something that kind of materialized as you were going through the songs? I mean, did you have that sense of, let's see if I can take this different places, or did you see that new things were happening and thought, okay, I should think about this in a different way?
Going into it, I felt like, let's change it up. Let's try something a little different, experiment with some different colors on the palette, and try to come up with something that still feels like what I've always done, hopefully. But yeah, just these, hopefully invite some amazing collaborators, which indeed happened, and I'm so grateful to work with all the folks that helped me out on the record, and really made it better than it would have been without them. That was a big intention as well, starting out. So yeah.
Let's talk about these collaborations, because obviously that's a pretty major deal. I don't know which way. What was the first out of these these different guys that you brought in? What was the first one? Either the first song that you thought about, I should have another voice here, and what it was then like to go out and sort of cast what that was going to be.
Yeah, it definitely felt like casting different parts for different songs. The first song was Verge, though, with Aloe Blacc, and I think I was sort of in the 11th hour of writing the demo. I kind of had a working demo with scratch vocals and everything in there, and then Aloe just popped into my head, and I just felt like, man, he would really add such a heart and soul to this song, and I didn't know him previously beforehand, so I just kind of went out on a limb, and didn't know what to expect, and sort of got his email and sent him the demo and introduced myself and said, "You probably have no idea who I am, but I feel like your voice would just be perfect on the track. Give it a listen if you have 5 minutes." And he wrote back and was so kind and gracious, and he was down to collaborate, and yeah, like I said, he really took what I did that was middle of the road and took it all the way to the finish line.
And was that how it worked with each of these collaborators? I mean, did you start with a song, think about who might fit, and then go out and approach folks? Was that the way that all of those came together?
Yeah. It was pretty much kind of spontaneous in that regard as far as picking the actual artist. But yeah, at the outset, I sort of like had the inclination that this song would do really well with a feature, and then I don't know who that is. It's sort of an empty slot. And then as the song progressed, and it was towards the end of the writing process, I was like, oh, Ala Black or Jay Cohen or Britt Nicole and stuff like that. And so in that way, it felt pretty natural.
So probably the most surprising is Jay Cohen to see on here, to have a big Nashville star with that kind of voice attached to these songs. What was the thought there? Somebody that you were familiar with, you thought specifically about his voice, or what got you to that?
Well, something a lot of people don't know about me is that I'm a huge fan of country music. Small town Minnesota kid out in the country. That's what's on the radio. It's kind of what everybody listens to. It's what everyone listened to in their truck on the way to high school, back in the day. So I grew up with it, and I'm a huge fan of it. So Jay Cohen is a legend to me, and I don't really get starstruck too much, but I kind of got the flutters just thinking about the idea of him being on the track, because he's so good at what he does, and I look up to him so much. Just top of his game. And yeah, I just kind of the same thing. I reached out to him and introduced myself and didn't know what to expect, kind of crossed my fingers. And the same thing, he wrote back, and he said he was a fan of my music, which again blew me away. So it's surreal. That's a good word for it. I listen back now to that track especially, and it's surreal to have somebody that I feel like I know his voice so well, because I know all of his records he's ever put out, and it's cool. But yeah, that song by itself, it was kind of my first experiment with this pop country hybrid, or however you want to describe it. And so he was the first person that came to mind.
What is it that, I'm curious, because those worlds now are it's so fluid, other than just he comes from the world of country, is there something to you that brings that song under the country umbrella, other than having his name attached to it? Is there something in the way that you wrote it or the way that it got recorded that kind of brings it over that line a little bit? Because now that's it's a hard distinction to make, maybe not between Owl City music and country, but between pop music and country music. How did you think about sort of the territory?
Yeah, it's funny. The more music that is made, I feel like the genres become more and more blurred. But for me, in my part of it, I sort of saw the instruments around me in the studio in a new way, like as new tools to use. And that, to me, is what kind of crossed it over into the country world, or my version of the country world. So I saw the acoustic guitar as a different tool in a way, playing it with a slide, and the idea of like a lap steel guitar was new for me. And, the kind of finger picking parts that are on that song on the acoustic guitar were sort of new for me in terms of appearing on an album of mine in the past. And just kind of looking at all my tools that I always have in terms of making a song, and thinking, how can I tweak this one out a little bit and make it twangy, I guess, or just give it that heart and soul that is what I feel like everyone associates with country music. And that was really cool for me. Instead of using the acoustic guitar the way I always have, I could use it in a different way.
And then the other of the collaborations to ask about, obviously, is which had to be fun, was the song with Hanson. And I guess the video just premiered, is now up and out in the world. Tell me about working with those guys, and also, I guess, this sort of 90s obsession that surfaced in that song and in the video especially.
Well, I grew up in the late 80s, so the 90s is when I was really coherent, I guess. And yeah, I just sat down and started remembering all these things that I've since forgotten that I remember thinking were so mind-blowing back in the day when I was a little kid as far as technology. Floppy disks, 2 megabytes. You could fit so many things on a 2 megabyte floppy disk, and super soakers and silly putty and GAC and pogs and all these cool things that probably aren't around, maybe just on eBay. But and just I had this big list in a text file on my laptop of all these cool things that I think, oh, it'd be fun to talk about that stuff. And so 2 of my co-writers on Unbelievable, Matt Thiessen and Emily Wright, we're all kind of in this same age. So we're like, oh, remember this? And then, oh, wait, what about this? I forgot all about this. And just the atmosphere in the room was really exciting because it's just fun to talk about it. So we're like, okay, how do we work all this stuff into a song? And the idea of the song is like, well, it'd be so cool to go back in time and find myself and say, all the stuff that you think is so, new and improved and mind-blowing technology-wise, like, look at my iPhone now, like, it's going to get crazy, and all the things you're going to be able to do someday with technology. I'm really into that stuff, so that was exciting. And yeah, just the whole nostalgia vibe. As I was writing the song, Hanson popped into my head in the same way that some of the other artists did, and kind of went out on a limb and took a leap of faith and emailed them, and again, the same thing. They were down to do it. They were so gracious. They could have turned me down easily. But yeah, they took what I did and made it awesome.
Kind of meta to bring Hanson into the 90s nostalgia song. And how, did they get like why you were coming to them and how that fit? And that was all, that
totally,
everybody played well with that. Yeah.
They did, yeah. And me and those guys are pretty similar in age too. So a lot of the things, that I had kind of started talking about, they kind of chimed in, and we're saying, what about Power Wheels? And climbing trees was like the biggest thing back in the day, and all, and just they kind of ran with it as well. And so I was on board.
So whether maybe it's one of the songs with one of these collaborations, or maybe not. Which of the songs on the album kind of surprised you the most? What ended up going somewhere that you really didn't expect, or take some whole other turn?
Well, probably the track Verge with Aloe Black. Not in the sense that I was expecting it to be less great than it turned out, but just in the sense that he added more colors to it than I envisioned. He kind of wrote. There's a kind of a down section towards the middle, towards the end. It's kind of a bridge section, and he kind of wrote this whole new melody that I hadn't thought about yet, and just gave the song more story and more weight. And I remember hearing the scratch kind of demo that he did. I think he was in Europe at the time. He just did it in his hotel room. I'm thinking, wow, yeah, that's it. That's what the song needed. So I was surprised, but in a real good way.
And how did it shape? We live in a world, obviously, where albums kind of mean something or they don't, or the way that songs fit together, maybe the way that people listen to them or maybe not. Did your vision for what this set of songs was going to do, did that shift along the way? I mean, as some of these things came in, or even as your own songs took shape, did that target kind of move one way or another as you were going through it?
A little bit, yeah. I think when I sat down initially thinking about the album, I think the target was a lot smaller than it is as it turned out. I guess I wasn't quite expecting it to feel as diverse with all the features and all the things that they added to it. And so yeah, I'm really proud of it. I'm so thankful for the artists who chipped in their talent. So thankful to them, and it really surpassed my my vision. Yeah.
Maybe a dumb question, but especially when it's something that you do so much. I mean, again, the laptop stays with you and everything, keeps going. How do you know when it's done? I mean, how do you know when, okay, that's as far as I'm going to take this thing? Which seems very different than if you're working with a band and you can sort of see like the momentum gets to a certain point and then diminishing returns. But when you're tweaking it endlessly like this, how do you know when to stop?
It's a tough thing to know, and I have no good answer for it. But for me, as a solo guy who kind of doesn't have to ask anybody else exactly to make whatever it is happen, I'm kind of in my own element all the time, and I'm a perfectionist, so nothing is ever perfect. And there's some point where I have to let it go and send it off to mastering, and that's kind of the last journey that the song takes before it's you can never go back and tweak it. That's like the best part of it is like fiddling around and turn the vocal up and down, and it's never quite right, and playing it in a million different speakers in my car and my iPod and earbuds, and testing it on, how does the song sound everywhere. I can play it out of any kind of speaker. That's fun, and so that's my favorite part is the 11th hour, I guess. And so once the clock strikes midnight, it's like I can't get it back, and it's gone, and it's tough. But the more I do it, the more I find myself learning to commit and say, this is the way it's going to be. It's never going to change, and I got to be cool with that, and I can't lose sleep over that. So it's become easier, yeah.
And I guess related, I don't know if you're yet into it, but what is it? What's the process of taking these and then figuring out what you do with them on stage? Obviously, you've been through it a few turns, but that's got to be a whole other way of thinking about these songs, given the way that you put them together. So what happens now?
Well, that's fun too, yeah, because I kind of, in a way, get to revisit the things that I wish I could have fixed, back on the album. If I listen back a year later and I think, oh, why didn't I turn that part up or pitch this part differently or whatever? Thankfully, when it comes time to start touring and actually performing the songs, I kind of get to go back into the session and okay, I'm back, and I can kind of shape it just a little bit more, which is an endless cycle, but it's a fun one. I love playing with different renditions of it, different arrangements of a given song to play live. Like, I'm going to double the intro here, and we're going to change up the melody a little bit, or we're going to make this cool kind of breakdown instrumental part in the middle somewhere that, just for the live version. And the great thing about that, too, is I'm so lucky to have 4 other players, live musicians with me on stage, who are so good at what they do, and they really give in the same way that a lot of the vocal features on the album gave life to the songs on the album. The live players reinterpret stuff on the fly a lot of times as well, and they just add something new. I have a guitar player who plays a lot of the keyboard lines. He converts them over to guitar, and it just adds a cool vibe, and it changes it just a little. So you recognize it and you know it, but it's the live version, and that's fun.
I got to ask, we were talking back before we came out a little bit about Minneapolis winters. Obviously, there's such a tradition of music out of that city, from so many different directions. Number one, do you feel a connection to whether it's Prince, the Replacements, all the different things that have come out of that area? Is there a legacy that you're aware of? And is there a reason? I mean, there's a lot of people who say, look, bands come out of there because you can't go outside for 6 months of the year, so you just stay inside and practice. And you're saying, you lock yourself in your basement. Is some of that, does some of that have to do with where you come from?
It does now, but actually, when I was in high school, to my ignorance, I wasn't really aware of all the amazing stuff that's from Minneapolis and from Minnesota. I'm from a small town, so Minneapolis, I don't think of as my hometown really. It's the closest city, thing to the big city where I'm from. But yeah, I'm from a tiny town south of there. And I guess as I continued to do, I was always doing my own thing as a kid. So I guess I should have paid more attention than I did. So now it's sort of like, wow, I have lots of shoes, big shoes to fill, sort of thing, to kind of keep the legacy going with Prince and Johnny Lang and everybody who's from there. So cool. And now I really do feel a connection in a great way. So.
And last thing I'm going to ask, and then I promised we'd go out to you guys. At risk of that, you're just sick of talking about it, but I have to ask about Fireflies, because that was a song that went from just like a hit into a phenomenon song. And what I remember is like my son's elementary school talent show. That was the song that 4 different kids got up and sang that year. It's a slot that I think Taylor Swift has permanently put a lock on since then, but you got in right ahead of that. Are you aware when a song takes on that kind of a life And what is it, when do you first sort of feel this thing happening, and what is it like from the inside to see something take on that kind of momentum?
It was surreal and it was mind-blowing, and I can't even pronounce like half the countries that they told me it went to number one in, like 26 countries, something like that. So for some nobody, like the quiet nobody from nowhere, like I still can't really fathom that. But what a cool feeling to go to sleep at night and think somebody out there, many somebody's connected with some random song that I wrote in my parents' basement, like in 2009. That's such a cool feeling, and that's a song that I'll never get tired of playing live, because the look on everyone's face, most of the kids there know it and play it around the world. And some countries where English isn't spoken, everybody still knows every word to that song. And I just feel lucky that it's like I'm fishing and I caught a good one and I didn't know it, and it's just this blessing. So I'm thankful.
Amazing thing to witness. Okay, so we're at time for you guys. I know you have mics out there, right? Or whatever we're doing. Let's start.
How did you come up with the name Owl City, and like what's the meaning behind it?
It's a great question. So believe it or not, my little town south of Minneapolis, Minnesota, there's lots of trees there, there's lots of woods. And I remember as a kid thinking, how many times do you hear an owl, but how many times do you ever see an owl? I saw an owl like one time at the zoo, but they're these elusive creatures, and for some reason, something about that connected with me, and I feel like, I kind of hide in a hole in a tree all day. I can relate to that. I kind of go away and do my own thing. Very much introverted. The way I'm wired is to be very in a shell. And so I kind of took that and just ran with it and just picked it out of the sky, Owl City, and it just felt kind of right. That's the honest truth.
As an artist, what's the most rewarding feeling after releasing an album?
When just seeing it on the website and seeing it on iTunes and knowing that it's out there and people can listen to it is so rewarding. But I think the thing for me is actually going on the road and playing it live and seeing people know the words, especially internationally. It's amazing here as well, but there's something amazing about how you get in a plane and you fly to South Korea, and there's every kid in the front row and 5 rows back know every word to the song, and some of them maybe don't speak English. And so just to know that music transcends time and space and language and culture, and that I got blessed to be in my shoes and to witness that is so rewarding.
If I can be obnoxious and follow that, since I have the mic in my hand. This moment is always such an amazing, fascinating moment to me, because like this is the thing you've lived with, a small number of people around you have lived with for a while, and then like there's the minute that then it's just out there in front of everybody and everybody reacts and responds. Do you get used to them? You've done it a couple of times now, but do you get used to that sensation of sort of this doesn't belong to me anymore, this is another thing, and how instantly that happens?
Yeah, it's real instant. I mean, I've lived with these songs, some of these songs for years and years that were old demos back in the day when I was still living with my folks, and there's a real instant thing where it's like, oh, these aren't really my babies anymore, like, and that's rewarding too. Just knowing that maybe a song that I wrote went out into the world and caught somebody's ear, and it means something to them that maybe I didn't even anticipate meaning, and maybe it's helping them cope with something in life that nobody knows about, their friends or their family, and maybe it's helping them in some way. That's my goal, at least, is that the music is uplifting in some way. But yeah, it's a real fine line where it's like, oh yeah, they're available out there, and they're not really mine anymore. But it's sad, but it's also, I'm kind of awestruck at the same time.
In previous interviews, you've spoken about previous albums like Maybe I'm Dreaming or Ocean Eyes, and said that they kind of feel unfinished. So with Mobile Orchestra, do you feel more like this is finished, this is good, I'm completely satisfied with this?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I'll never be quite satisfied. There's always something I wish I could tweak a little bit more, But yeah, there's kind of like I mentioned before, there's some level of learning to commit to something and say, this is what it's going to be, and I'm going to like it, kind of a thing. It's almost a mind over matter thing. But, Yeah, I listen back to it now, and it feels good. It feels like it was the right move to make. And part of the thing about some of my earlier records is that I second guessed everything as I was making them. Is this the right thing? And sometimes it's better just to go with your gut and just say, yeah, that feels right. Put it down, save as, and it's a good thing. So yeah.
We have time for one more question.
I think in the song Fireflies and Good Time, you really capture like a certain element of happiness and just pure, like, I remember listening to my friends and just jumping up and down and smiling and dancing. And it's kind of like the song Shout, it gives you like a certain feeling inside that not every other song does, that even, aims to achieve that. Like, how do you, when you're working the song, like, is it difficult to find that special element to give you that like really good feeling inside?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes I kind of have to scrape and kind of dig to bring that up. But usually, if I kind of know when it happens, and usually it's not really as much about the vocals or the lyrics as it is about the track, the instrumental bits that all fit together. And that way, it usually has to do with some kind of synthesizer thing. There's something I guess I tend to do in the way that the Edge did for U2 and does for U2. I kind of do this thing with synthesizers that using this dotted eighth note delay, I can kind of create these motors, is what I like to call them, and they're kind of in there to propel the music forward, and they kind of drive the music. And I try to make those real melodic and catchy. Like the intro of Fireflies is a good example. It's just kind of this motor. And usually, if I can nail down that bit of it, the rest of the song kind of comes into being, and I'm like, I could listen to this, kind of by itself. And once that feels right, I can build everything around it and find the right blend of all that stuff.
All right, our time has whizzed on by. Thank you guys all for joining us here. Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you, Adam Young from Owl City. Mobile Orchestra is out now. Good luck getting this thing off the starting line, and we'll see you on the road in the fall.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank you
guys.
guys.